Zack fucking Snyder.
Hey guys, oh wait, before we go into this discussion, I have these 3 hats. Sorry, I found in my office. These are the hats I made for the crew. They're just crew hats from the movie, so I was just gonna chuck them out to you guys. Alright, sorry, thank you guys, those were cluttering my office. That's the hat I, by the way, wear every day, so it's my, whatever. Anyway.
I love it.
What do you want to, so we're going to talk about the movie a little bit.
Zach, my name's Adam. I'm a longtime friend and collaborator with the Stone Quarry team. I was one of the architects of the world building kind of behind this, and Zach, Wes, and Debbie were kind enough to ask me to come here and get really nerdy.
Yeah, so let's get nerdy. Also, Adam, probably if you have any of the t-shirts we bought ever or made, Adam probably designed it, so that's just how far
love
Adam is in the Snyder machine. Really good, really incredible. He also tattooed this on my arm. Tattoo that says Deborah. He tattooed that.
Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, on Dawn of the Dead. At lunch on Dawn of the Dead.
There we go.
He tattooed that on me. So that's been a while.
Well, Zach, congratulations. You have all 4 films that are finally out there in the world. What's it like to be Zack Snyder now?
Well, I'll just say that it's really, look, it was a long road, and I mean, we talked a little bit about this when I did the intro. That was 6 hours ago, but 7 actually. But it is good. It's really incredible to have the movies out. And the thing that's interesting, really, from my perspective, is that, you know, this is the movie that I wrote. This is the movie, now that you guys have seen sort of just what I really, the sort of real, like, intent of the sort of world building and the myth building and sort of the sort of ethos of what the movies were kind of about. And there were so many influences. I mean, really, in the end, I think the real hardcore kind of why of the movie was, you know, sort of the transcendent part, the part that's not Star Wars, is really the sort of heavy metal, like, part of the movie. Like, I really feel like when you think about a live action heavy metal movie, that's really kind of what you got. Like, that's what we wanted to do, and I really feel like that's kind of, we got pretty close to it.
Zack Snyder saving us from the sea of sameness that's being pressed upon us, I'm going to say that, right? You are an artist of the highest order, in my opinion, and it's just amazing to see how intuitively you work and you put your visions out there, and I think that's just becoming more and more important, you know, as we experience what we're experiencing. So, just want to say thank you. Fucking amazing.
I appreciate that, brother.
Okay, so talking about the film, so in these 2 movies, we saw a shift. I mean, first off, from your titles, from Child of Fire to Chalice of Blood, and Scargiver's The Curse of Forgiveness. I feel like the center of the circle moved a little bit. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I feel like I wanted to frame the movies in a slightly different way, you know, with the PG-13 versions of the movie, which I felt like, you know, really were about sort of appealing to a broader audience. I think that these movies really, what I wanted you to do is like, okay, we're gonna go, I'm gonna say, all right, take my hand, we're gonna go on a little bit of a journey. And so I just felt like the framing mechanism of those 2 titles, the new titles, were a lot more sort of in the weeds with the mythology and with the sort of world building that we had endeavored to create. And so it just felt, you know, like people that were into the ride would understand the new naming convention was about a lot of the kind of new attitude, I guess, of these movies.
And we had a shift in that character focus as well, too, right? I remember you talking about that we're kind of going from a Korra-centric story slightly over to an Issa-centric story. And, you know, that the tone of things changed. And I'll just say, you know, that amazing poster, you know, I mean, it's just mind-blowing. Sort of, you know, moving over to Issa and the Isian myth, you know, and all the lore of Motherworld there, right? Like, I mean, we had We had the wolf and the shimmering skyworm wrapping themselves around her, and all of our symbol sets there. Like it was a shift.
Yeah, and I think that the important thing, when you have that, because like the Issa story really, when you look at the kind of the giant long look that we were creating with these movies, if there were like 6 movies, another whatever, 4 or 5 movies beyond this, it really becomes a very Issa-centric thing, and Korra really becomes a servant to this sort of Godhead concept, and I think that's really, for me and for sort of the giant myth that is Rebel Moon, that was really important, that we start really establishing the sort of the gods of the world and understand that what their importance are and how they're going to come back and everything they're going to do.
Yeah, I'm going to say that. You're really a filmmaker and just a maker in general who just really believes in what they make and believes in their worlds, and so it's contagious, and it makes me believe in your fans believe in that. And I remember when I was first tasked to kind of come onto the project, and after I read the script, and I don't think this is unique to this movie, but I mean it's really particular in this movie, is that you create a universe that has consequences, and I think that that's really interesting. Is that your universe is not neutral, that it sort of inclines towards redemption. If your heroes sort of have the courage enough to kind of act and make it happen, but it sort of wants that to happen. Like there's a good underneath all this amazing fucking heavy metal, craziness and this madness. There's an ember of good inside all of that darkness, and I think it really resonates with me in particular. I think your fans as well.
Yeah, I think that's the sort of mythic core of everything, is that I mean, for me anyway, the why of it is that there is this universal sort of truth that, and well said through all the heavy metal insanity, you can with some sort of laser focus find this kind of burning ember at the heart of it, and you can warm your hands on that righteousness if you are of the correct iron metal. That you can get to it, and I think that's really what I think all the great myths, all the Joseph Campbellian kind of hero's journeys, and you can talk about it forever, but that really at its core is what it's all about. It's like they get their boons and they bring them back to us, and we are better because of it. I hope. I mean, maybe, and I think that I do believe that there's I love the hopeful part of it. I am a believer in the I mean, I don't want to say the happy ending necessarily, because I'm not always a happy ending guy, but I do think that like on a long enough timeline, there's going to be a happy ending. You know what I mean? Like and it might be fleeting, but it would be there's a moment where we can kind of be redeemed. I believe in that redemption sort of story. I like that.
Yeah, and I love that your characters believe it or learn to believe it as well, too, right? And the path there isn't about belief, but it's by action. And I think that's just, an epic action at that, right? I mean, I think that's just awesome.
Yeah, it's like trial through fire, like they have to there's a crucible of blood and fire, and when they come out the other side, hopefully they're better, or they believe at least, Maybe they haven't achieved it, but they think they see a way,
And Mother World itself sort of and we'll get into this in a little bit, but sort of does its best to sort of get around those consequences, acts like it's a might makes right civilization, right? And the crimes or the sins it's created against the universe sort of have a response, right? Sort of create the circumstances in which in Issa, not just this, but in Issa will arrive and redeem the universe. Right?
Yeah, because otherwise there's no, kind of on that note, the idea of myth in general, like this concept of myth, requires the sanity of the universe has to create an Issa almost, otherwise it's pure chaos and there's no redemption or anything. So to my myth-making mind, the crimes of the mother world always will be answered by an Issa at some point, you know. So that's just cool. That's just cool.
Yeah, and you said chaos, and just because we're getting deep in this, it was something that was always in the back of my mind, of that this is sort of a struggle of law and chaos. I mean, got my Michael Moorcock on, you know, and it just sort of like, it seems to rhyme with that in a lot of really interesting ways.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, like, you know, the story of the Mother World, you know, in the end, is they have this pretend order that they superimpose over every single thing that they come across, you know. And I think that this sort of make-believe version of their world, that they want to make everything them, no matter where they go. And I think that's this kind, but it's kind of a bullshit version of order. But in the end, you know, if our heroes have the metal, they can rise beyond that and sort of reorder it. You know, that's what Issa's kind of job would be eventually.
I love that. Yeah, that sort of unification by force. You know, that they're smothering and make it small and simplify, right? And even that was sort of behind the design of the alphabet, and right, and their symbol sets, about making things geometric, simplifying the language down to as few characters as possible while maintaining English. You know, that sort of thing. Kind of, again, just crushing things down and to control it, like that sort of.
Yeah, Adam designed the all the fonts for the Mother World, and when we were talking about what they should be, we had a lot of these conversations about, like, make sure, because there's an ancient version of the sort of Imperium writing, which is like a little more scripty and a little more beautiful and elongated. But then as we get closer to this version of the Mother World's forces, they get more and more like simplified and boxy and like more. They're trying to make order out of chaos, and you know, and the script kind of tells that story. So it's really, we tried to do that in every way. Like when we were working on the movie, like all aspects of design, whether it be the costumes or even the sets and everything, you know, we would always have these philosophical conversations about, like, can we superimpose another story on top of the design story that you see, sort of the aesthetic simplicity of what, you know, okay, the guy's got to dress like this in order to, like, you know, we can't have him naked, you know, you start there. And I think that, like, you know, but then you say, like, oh, this would be a cool uniform. And then, like, you say, okay, but now that we have a cool uniform, how do you deconstruct it and superimpose onto it these kinds of little stories so that every little design element of the movie tells a greater story about, like, the world, you know? And I think that was fun. For me, it was super fun to kind of do that because when you're creating something like this from scratch and you don't get anything for free, you know, like there's no location that you can go shoot at, you always, now you have to think about all those things all the time, you know, as far as, you know, what does this say? What does that mean? You know, and that's a fun part of making the movie.
All right, let's zoom out here a little. You had talked. This is not the difference between these 4 films. It's not just bonus material. I mean, you have different selections of there are different assemblies, different shots, different color, right?
Different color, yeah.
Yeah. And you had said to me, and I thought this incredibly interesting, is that there's slightly different stories, and that led to a conversation about what happened over time.
Yeah, we were saying that, like, for instance, if we made more movies, that the R-rated version of this universe would start to separate from the PG-13 version of this universe even greater than it does in this version of the movie. Because if you think about, like, even the timelines within the context of the movies are different, you know, like they find the scout ship sort of at a different time, like everything is slightly different. And even the characters themselves, you could argue, sort of have different experiences, or we understand them just differently. And so I think that you know, over time would make itself, it would compound itself over time and really start to sort of separate the two universes. So that's a fun thought experiment that we could probably spend a couple of weeks talking about, but we don't have to. That's cool.
And maybe sort of getting into some of the particulars here. We had talked about Isa and sort of the thrice-born redeemer. I think is a phrase that we had used in the past. And we see sort of glimpses of previous incarnations in the backgrounds of some of these, in some of the scenes in here. And I don't want to talk too much about that, but it's kind of interesting.
Well, yeah, there's that cool painting where she's blowing the giants up, because we have there's this whole mythic battle that happened sort of in an ancient time on the Mother World, where there are giants that walked the planet, I guess is the Earth, you want to say, but it's not really the Earth. I guess it's Earth. Anyway, and so Isa was called into this, Isa was born and sort of came into her powers during this huge struggle, and that was one of the myths that we've talked about, is where she blew those giants up. Because you can imagine that the Kalis would eventually, if they were to free themselves from all the dreadnoughts, because every dreadnought then probably has a Kali in its engine room that, if given the right circumstances, could be released, and those same goddesses, if they were walking the earth, would be formidable in a conflict, I think. So that could be a cool because, and then even if you look at the sequence where they're in the garden and Belisarius and Cora are talking, Arthales, I guess at that point, are talking about killing the princess. If you look closely, there's all these giant skeletons in the ground all around in the field. So through some zombie magic, they can be resurrected, and we could have a skeleton versus Kali battle at some point.
Well, since you mentioned the Kali, let's talk about the Ru Kali a little bit, and the crimes against the universe, or the divine order that oversees the universe, or whatever we're calling it. One thing I always found really provocative is when you describe the Kalis to me for the first time, and the metaphor that arose from that of literally we have these giant women, these atomic Valkyries that are from this higher dimensional order that through trickery, right, are pulled into our prime material realm, and sort of their bodies are bound and then used to fuel the war machine. There's just, again, this is sort of one of those glimpses that I think, these glimpses that you have and sort of bring it to the surface, and it's holy shit, that's fucking genius, right?
Yeah, it's fun too, because the idea that the Kalis, we were, to me, it was I was imagining okay, so the Imperium sort of ran up against their ability to sort of, there was a huge problem with resources that, to conquest space, they were using up all the natural resources of Toa, and pretty much or Moa, sorry, of Moa, and pretty much had were exhausting their own world. And so the high priests of their world had divined this other dimension, and literally there's this animated film that we've been working on. I don't know if we're going to make it 100%, but we're working on it. But it tells the story of this kind of what I would say is a sort of humble
A fool.
Yeah, and a guy who works at the DMV, basically, who discovers who is the patsy that gets sent sort of dimensionally to find these Kalis. And I think the idea, to me, was that what seems like a discovery through chance or circumstance turns out to be this very carefully calculated event that the priests, the Ministry of Information has created to get the Kalis, because the idea is like once they've captured the collies, they have this sort of infinite resource that can jump them, you know, not only is it this massive power source, but can also fold space and make them be able to travel and conquer galaxies rather than just their little star system. So that was really a massive move for them. But inside of all of them now is these it's like Trojan horses that they've created. It's been, 1,000 years and they forgot that, it's like Samson. It's like the Samson story in some ways. Like they just see the collies as like an engine. They've forgotten that they're like actual goddesses inside those shells. So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, and Motherworld itself, I mean, this is sort of a reoccurring theme with them, right? Like in the sense that they make these technological jumps, that instead of improving their lives, they make them more desperate for resources because it's like their hunger devours them, right? And this is just, a great example of that. And then I guess one of the things about that too is that, and here we have this crime again against the universe, and then the universe responds 1,000 years later. I mean, universal time is large,
Yeah, and also for a goddess, you can imagine that like 1,000 years is not a big deal. It's not generations of Motherworld soldiers sort of just really solidifying their philosophical point of view in regard to the collies makes it even more ironic and ridiculous eventuality, in their own demise. So that's a cool two locomotives running toward each other in this universe.
And then they decide to kill the Redeemer, right? Like,
and they kill the Redeemer. Yeah.
Now they're off the map. You know what I mean? Like I think this is the Imperium is sort of, they're off the rails. There's everything's crumbling around them. I mean, this is sort of it.
Although it seems like, I think to Belisarius, the idea of killing the princess seems like a really great idea and feels like the only way forward. And I think that's a cool and incredibly short-sighted.
Yeah, the logic is sound.
The logic is sound, but sort of in a cosmic sense, it's like obviously you just put a gun to your own head, and that's exactly what I did.
All right, I want to talk a little bit about Toa, the first 20 minutes of the director's cut.
Sure.
One, it sort of rhymes with this idea, that this might makes right. It's so Roman and biblical, right? And it feels like end times. And just based on what we were just talking about, not only end times for Toa, but also, a civilization that does this to other civilizations can't last. That this is like they're turning the universe into a literal hellscape. And this is the first scene where we meet the priests and the teeth.
Yeah, we get more teeth in this movie. Obviously, I have some sort of dental obsession. The soul is in the teeth, Could be. We don't know. But it's a cool metaphor. For like snatching something, like taking a prize, from, it just seemed cool. I don't know why. I was like, maybe there's like a picture frame with thousands of teeth on it, and whoever they kill, they like take the tooth and they put it in, and it's like a mosaic. But does that sound cool? I don't know. Yeah, that's like this is what it sounds like.
Well, I think it really provokes some interesting ideas, and I think, although the teeth, you might say, is more symbolic or ritualistic, we do have a scene where Noble orders after killing, what are the guy's name is, from Providence, right? That they get the information out of him after they kill him.
Yeah.
They should dissect his brain. And
dissect his brain.
Information out of it, right? So we have that, and we'll touch here in a minute. We'll talk more about Oracle Steel in a minute. But we have this idea that, and I'm going to even throw like sort of the bloodline as well into this, is that substance, especially biological substance, is not only in principle, but holds memory or certain kinds of information that is indeed extractable.
Sure.
Right? That is
I mean, look, we always, at best, when you teeter on at the edge of magic, like when you have, it's cool, like, 'cause like with a sci-fi movie like this, and especially something that's like slightly, comes from like a heavy metal universe, you want always, for me, like you want always like this idea of magic and this idea of sci-fi to be like, braided together, because and when I say magic, I just mean things that like are inexplicable, right? So the idea of sci-fi is like everything's explainable, and the idea of like this magic thing is like, oh no, you can't understand this. So like trying to understand it is a folly, and I think that to me is really the fun of a universe like this, because you'll always have this larger mythological thing that will come in to trump everything that you've kind of designed, which is, and I think that to me the teeth also, it's a gruesome and because it's industrialized by the Mother World's army, it also shows at what level the sort of barbarism has risen to, like I think and also the sadness of Issa's portrait, right? So you can imagine that what happens, like Issa died, and they were like, oh, we loved Issa, even though we killed her. We love Issa, we think she's amazing, to justify our barbarism, we're doing this in the name of like slain child. And so that makes it cooler, for them.
It's cynicism at the highest order.
Yeah, it's really
right?
sad. It's really coolly, ridiculously bad.
Well, so getting into these enigmas here, and I'm going to put two on the table here that really blew my mind, and it took me a moment to wrap my head around them. One was, while we're talking about Issa and the portrait, is the idea that glass plate photography has a place in your science fiction or science fantasy universe. And it took me a moment to wrap my head around, and I fucking love it. Like, it's just, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, it's more that Steve Berkman has a place in my science sci universe, probably. No, just kidding. I mean, not kidding, but I just thought, there's something also that, Steve, I don't know, Steve, are you here? He was here earlier. Anyway, Steve took those photos, and he took the Wonder Woman photo in BBS, and he's awesome. And he has this amazing books. He's an amazing artist. You can go buy all of his stuff because he's awesome. But what happens is, like in that photo of Issa, it requires a super long exposure, right? In order to take a photograph and depending on the light, but like in this case, it was a super long. I think it was like a 2-minute exposure. I think he's not here. Anyway, it was like a 2-minute exposure, and so like they put these like little calipers on your head, and you have to like sit super still, and she gets this like your eyes kind of get this dead look in them, and I just thought that way of portraiture was like going to be really interesting for this process, that it's not like a normal photograph, like it's neither like a sci-fi like weird, like you can imagine that we could have done some sort of Blade Runner like moving photo, which is cool, but like it's kind of like a weird little if it's like alive, or we could have done a painting, which also okay. So there's paintings, I guess, then we have paintings. Or I was like, this kind of glass photography is kind of weirdly in between. It's like in another, like we don't take photography on glass, except for Steve. You know what I mean? And so it renders this kind of otherworldly quality that is like really incredible. And so, so that was how I kind of justified it. In my mind, and the image is exactly what I wanted, so it was perfect.
I remember when I was watching him take that photograph, just the notion of the king's gaze, right? We have this thing, and now we have this like cyclopean instrument photographing the king, who was the source of that gaze. There was sort of a really interesting moment there.
That's fun.
So the other thing, I said I had two things. The other thing was space coal. And,
Space coal, yeah, which obviously is not coal. I do recall that there were some people that were mad at the PG-13 movies because they were saying that how can these ships run on coal? And I say, you're right, that is a good question. What's better is they run on this sort of mushed up bodies of our conquered enemies that we feed to this giant goddess who eats them and spits out energy. So that's better than coal, I guess.
Zack Snyder, ladies and gentlemen. Zack Snyder.
But they were right about the coal on one hand, like that would be crazy.
All right, let's jump over to the Jimmies.
Oh boy, that's Jimmy.
Our intergalactic quest knights.
Yep.
We talk about them generally, and also maybe about our Jimmy in this film, the rewilding, or the Pinocchio
Yes.
path.
I want to be a real boy. Yeah.
Yeah, that he finds himself on. I mean, one thing that I find really interesting is just this connection, and I know I've talked ad nauseum to you about this, but this relationship that Jimmy has with Sam. And Sam is one of my personal favorite characters in it because she transforms Jimmy. Like with a simple touch, suddenly Jimmy is changed. And that sets him on a course. And I think that there's sort of a reoccurring, archetype as this cupbearer, this chalice bearer that we see in Sam. I mean, certainly not on the level of Isa, but we see this reoccurrence, and also the servant woman Pollux that washes Titus, right?
Water as a theme.
Yeah, water as a theme, right? And there's sort of an archetype here that's really interesting in that relationship with the Jimmies. You want to talk about the Jimmies a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I think the one cool thing about that relationship between Sam and our Jimmy is that you can imagine that our Jimmy has never really probably interacted with a young woman, Issa-esque. He's probably his entire last 500 years been on some ship on the edge of the galaxy, just basically killing in the name of this righteous child that has never been born, that may never be born. And so I really love the idea that they had been given this religious belief system that was so profound to them. And if you're listening to the podcast, you'll understand. But however that was given to them, it was given to them so perfectly that they kind of understood a version of love or of sort of religious fervor. And I like the idea that these creatures were given this kind of probably without the idea that Issa would ever actually be born. We don't know whether or not the myth of Issa is real, but we're going to create these knights that believe it so deeply. And probably it suits us better if Issa is never born, if we're controlling them, because for eternity they will just fight hoping that one day she'll be born. Now, I think that when Issa actually is born, and you get that from Jimmy when he says, I felt a great warmth for the universe, whatever, in Anthony Hopkins' voice, is that suddenly wow, so my entire existence that, if I want to be cynical, could be maybe not real, but now is confirmed to be real, and that she is real, and I may never see her in person. And that's fine. Just like I may never see God in person, that's okay. But then to have God, to get the call that says, oh yeah, by the way, God got killed. So there's no God. Your God your 500 years of existence, your complete reason for existing has died. And so now what are you going to do with yourself? And I just loved that idea of these soldiers that were such awesome warriors and incredibly just would do anything, would just die for Issa, and then one day they just couldn't after Issa's killed, they just don't. They've lost it. They've lost their will to fight. They become like conscious objectors. They're just like, we don't even care. There's nothing. We don't care about anything. They've lost their will to live, basically. And the idea that our Jimmy could kind of start to glimpse a reason again, to exist and have that be on his own terms, I just thought was a really fun idea. It's a bit of a rant.
You would often refer to their poet's heart, right? And how ironic that it's the robot's heart that is broken, right? I mean,
yeah, and that they are really like these beautiful poets, that they really have this kind of, when they were made as these beautiful objects, but with the idea that, like I said, I just like the idea that the actual Issa being born was a thing that nobody, it's like saying, oh, I'm going to design a creature that loves Santa Claus more than anybody. And he'll kill for Santa. And then Santa shows up, and everyone's like, oh, fuck. Now what? He's fucking real. And that's problematic, And then someone fucking blows Santa away,
My God.
Well, I mean, he is sneaking into people's houses, so,
So we're talking about the Jimmies being these beautiful creatures that were built, right? And what were they built from? This leads us to the conversation about Oracle Steel, and this unique substance that's in our universe.
So the Oracle Steel is our crazy, that's what Nemesis' swords are made of, it's what the Kryptonian swords are made of. It's what Jimmy's armor is made of. So that's why when he's just standing there getting freaking pummeled by, those molten shots, he's he's fine. It's not that big of a deal to him. They are killable, but you gotta really, it's not an easy task. So, but the idea that the Oracle Steel has memory, it has, it's a mystical substance that, I think there's a really magical and deep dive to the idea that their skin, their metal skin is of a magical substance that we have yet to discover. No?
Yeah, and bringing that to Nemesis and her swords and gauntlets. I remember you saying that, again, very, very provocative, saying that Nemesis herself was not a sword fighter prior to her donning the gauntlets.
Yeah, the gauntlets, I think she says, that the gauntlets basically taught her, it's all the knowledge of past generations, because, like she says that, generations before hers, there was a martial society, but now they had become peaceful, and that she didn't know anything about, she never killed anybody, she didn't know anything about that, and then she cut her arms off and put those gauntlets on. The gauntlets, she basically downloaded Neo style, how do you fight, I know Kung Fu now, basically.
And it might not download the same information to different people.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
It's conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
what are you good at? What do you have an aptitude toward? I'd probably be a gardener or something.
A potter.
A potter, for sure.
Pinch pots. And we have the same substance with the Kryptonian sword as well, but they've sort of altered this, right? They have a different relationship.
Correct. And I think that was the thing that we tried to do sort of symbolically. If you look at the Kryptonian swords, is they have a little motor on them attached to them. It fires them up, where Nemesis are turned on by her own hands, her now hands, but she wills them on and off. It's her, some kind of, And meanwhile, the Kryptonians have to push a button, which is so sad for them, to turn on their swords, which is just really pathetic and loserish.
And we played this idea that hasn't always been the case with the Kryptonians. It's sort of as the relationship
Right.
to the Mother World.
The closer they've gotten to the Mother World, the further away they've gotten from their relationship to that.
Yeah, to the Oracle Steel.
Yeah. And that was once a spiritual connection. And that the Kryptonians were also. What's that? Oh, you wanted some audience questions?
Yeah. We're going to take some audience questions. We're right here in the front of the hat.
Oh, front the hat, nice.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people here that are probably aspiring filmmakers as well, and I'm just curious if you would ever consider doing a master class or have any, you know,
Sure.
reveal the secrets of
Reveal the
starting
secrets.
it from like writing to
How do you do it?
Yeah, how do you do it? Basically?
Yeah. No, I absolutely, we've talked about it quite a bit, actually. You know, I was, I think that there absolutely, we've talked in recent, literally in recent months, I've talked a lot about like, really, well, an experience that I had at film school was, and I'm not sure, you know, you guys there's probably fresh film students here who can probably understand this better than, you know, I went to film school quite a while ago. Obviously, I'm an old fucker. But when I was in film school, like some of my favorite stuff that I did was the Super 8 classes that I had, you know, where we would shoot Super 8. And now philosophically, the thing about Super 8 that's really interesting is that when you shoot a Super 8 film, you know instinctively that that film is not the movie. That's not the one that's gonna be your greatest film, right? Because you're like, it's Super 8, it can only go so far, right? I'd have to shoot it again in 35 if I was to if it was a masterpiece. If this Super 8 film I'm working on right now is a masterpiece, I'd have to shoot it again in 35. I never thought that. But you could. And so my point is that I wonder that in film school right now, because anyone can get a red camera, I would say that an average film student's access to the same gear that I shot this movie with is real, right? Getting a red camera and some Zeiss high speeds is not crazy. That's not a crazy thing. You know, you can call me up and be like, oh, I got the camera. Should we shoot? So, but the problem is with that is that camera can make you think oh shit, this might be the movie. This might be the movie that makes, you know, this might be the masterpiece. Fuck, I gotta be careful. And you can choke yourself, as a film student, you can choke yourself out because you can't just let it be a movie. You can't just let it be exercise. You can't let it be practice. You know what I mean? Because there's a chance it's awesome. And the gear makes you think it's that. So I really wondered about, and the conversation we've had about, is is there a way, is there a format that's not this, that's in between, that allows film students to really exercise more and make more films and practice? Because I got a lot of practice. You know, also I made TV commercials for 10 years. So I got, you know, I practiced quite a lot. I got my 10,000 hours before I made Dawn of the Dead. You know, I knew when I went to the set of Dawn of the Dead, I had been a director cameraman for 10 years of commercials. I'd done TV commercials all around the world. I'd shot with everybody at movie stars, and you know, I might have been a first-time director, but there was nothing on the set, not a thing, not a piece of equipment, not a scenario that I hadn't seen before, right? That I hadn't kind of, you know, understood. And I just think that would be a thing that I would be interested in doing, is getting to the real down and dirty, deep bones of shooting a scene and understanding it. Because I think that's it's a thing that I think, you know, it's a language that is intuitive and obvious, but it's fun to just do it, you know? You just want to shoot it and to feel it, you know, because it's once you're in the language of it, it's a really, you oh, I see. A lot of things become obvious. And I think that comes also with a relaxed and not pressured point of view. When I'm on set making a movie, even Rebel Moon with Johnny and whatever, I feel very relaxed with the gear and with the language, you know? I feel it's intuitive. And I just think that's a thing that you want to get reps to get that intuitive feeling. So when you're on the set of your movie, you're not oh fuck, this is the shot, this is the close-up, oh fuck, I'm gonna fuck it up. You know, you want to feel no, this is cool, I'm good, like I'm not nervous, I'm just, I speak this language and I can do this, so I think that would be a thing I would love to like talk to students about and figure out how to make them feel comfortable in the way they see, you know what I mean? Because like, I've always said over the years also that like, the way you see, any one of you in here, like the movie you make, the world through your eyes, that's the thing I want to see. Like my favorite movies, and I'm sure you guys agree, are the movies that are made by guys and girls that don't give a fuck about whatever the normal way of seeing is. They're like, hey, come with me, look at the world, stand behind me for a second, and this is what I see. And you go on those journeys and you see those movies, and it's moving and it's emotional and it's unique, and you're like, I wouldn't have thought of that. That's crazy. That's cool. And that's what I want to see from you guys. Is like, take me somewhere, show me something that I wouldn't think of, that I couldn't have imagined. And I think that's a great and cool thing to cultivate.
Guy in the overcoat?
I did want to ask that, a big thing. I know this may not be part of Rebel Moon, but I did want to ask that, where was Bane during BVS? It's a cool question.
That's a good question. Where was Payne during BBS is the question.
Or the entire, like, the apocalypse before Superman.
Yeah, where is Payne? Where is he hanging? Where is he? I don't know. But I love the question. It's my favorite question. It's cool. I'd have to really, yeah.
How about here in red and black in the center?
Netflix representing.
Oh yeah, Netflix guy. Good girl.
In the R-rated versions, I noticed in a couple of scenes, Cora had some scarring that wasn't there in the PG versions. Are we to believe that's from, her time in the Imperium? Or is there like a deeper story we're getting to later maybe on that? And then also, Titus had a t-shirt with some black X's on them in this movie. And I've seen you wear that in interviews. Is there any significance to that?
Okay, yeah, first, Cora's scars. And Sophia's here. We talked about that. She's hiding, but she's here. And she's incredible, so we should all just anyway, yeah, so the scars were a couple things. Yes, her time as a warrior, as a soldier, and that she was deep in it, and it was that, the sacrifices that she made. Also, the crash, in her escape from escaping from the death of Issa, and her being tracked across. It's 4 years. The timeline is 4 years from the death of Issa to when they show up on Velt, the appear. So there was 2 years where she was kind of knocking around the galaxy that we don't see. That's the Issa Chronicles, whatever, or the Korra Chronicles, call them whatever you want. Anyway, where she was escaping Hawkshaws and bounty hunters and whatever, and then she ends up on Velt, right? So all of that would be part of that story, and then I think that, Sophia really wanted to make sure that that sort of the character, the sort of ethos of the character was represented, that she wouldn't just be this, not a mark on her, that there's a price, and I think that I was really into that too. So I was like, yes, that's cool. And then the black X's are just, it was funny because I'd seen the shirts and they had come out with all the sort of distressed t-shirts that we had on set, you know, and especially Titus's are really cool. And they had the little X's. I was like, I go, those are X's are really cool. I go, oh, what does that mean? And they're like, well, you know, it's just like, you know, they're like little repairs to the shirt. And I was like, okay, cool. Can you put those on my shirt? Yeah. Okay, do it. That's what happened.
How about way up there in the back of the gray shirt? Raise your hand. Yeah, right there,
What I've always enjoyed, and I think many of your fans enjoy, is the close appreciation and reflection of illustration, comic book artists, but also classical artists in your design and your of the scenes and the cinematography and cinematographers that you hire. I mean, this film in particular had many callbacks to old master paintings and the lighting utilized in it. And of course, your love and generous treatment of comic books and Greek comic book artists is well known. So I was wondering if you could just speak about that, because it's
Sure.
something really distinctive about the way you work that is not reflected in a lot of other people working in film.
Sure. Yeah, no, yes, it's true. I'm a huge fan of, you know, fantasy illustration, whether it be Frank Franzetta or like Caravaggio or whatever. And I do effort to, I'm a student of lighting, and so that, the way the masters, I'm a huge fan of like window light, I'm a huge fan of top light, I'm a huge fan of like, you know, even just the scene with like, where Titus is getting washed, you know, is very much like, you can imagine it's just very much, it's like a skylight kind of lit scene, you know, and it's very sort of classical in its construction. And so, yeah, for me, and because I draw, and it's my hope anyway that, you know, as I'm sort of conceiving, whether it be a scene or the sort of palette of the movie, I do try as best I can to, you know, constantly keep my eye on the ball of like, what is the sort of design aesthetic, illustrative design aesthetic of this scene or that scene, and how do they connect? And the truth is, on a movie like this, it becomes, at first, in the early stages, sure, there's plenty of reference, you know, actual paintings that I'm like going, yeah, this, that, this. And then what happens is it becomes a sort of ecosystem of its own where it like begins to reference itself, which I think is kind of the ideal situation for a movie like this, is because like even like if you look at, there's 2 movies, so it's 6 hours of shot making where you start to like, or like from, you know, a mythological standpoint, you're like, oh yeah, that reminds me of this, which is actually a scene in the movie from earlier, you know. And I think that is the ideal scenario, because you then start this kind of closed loop ecosystem where even from a design standpoint, where you start to like really create your own world. But there's always the notes and there's always the underpinnings of like those original you know, references that I've kind of loved, you know, Tiepolo, the list is probably endless, you know, of painters and artists that you know, Wyeth we talked about, and it's everything, you know, so, yeah. What's that? Yeah, I mean, sometimes, I mean, like, you know, we'll have some, because I'll be drawing, and then, like, you know, if Jared is doing a painting, you know, and I'll be like, we'll talk about it, and then he'll show me a painting that he did that's really awesome, and I'll be like, oh yeah, that's cool, that makes me think of this, and then, you know, so it is a constant conversation, you know, between like the concept artists, my storyboards, the production designer, you know, there's like this kind of, echo chamber that is good in a good way. So yeah.
Got a balanced room here. Do we have any women that have any questions? Oh, in the back there? Yes.
So, what do you put into writing your female characters?
Yes.
Because I know Cora is a badass, so is Diana, so is Mira.
Yeah.
What effort do you put into that?
You know, it's funny. I
Capture
mean,
what
it's a good question, but I feel like it's not. It doesn't feel like a lot of effort, you know. And I'll say it feels really natural. Like I have strong women in my life, and they're very powerful. Debbie, as you know, is literally Wonder Woman for me. And so, and you know, and I have amazing daughters, and I had an incredible mother who was unbelievably eccentric and powerful. And I just think that, like, for me, you know, this sort of divine feminine is really an amazing and powerful thing that we all have to sort of bow down to. And I think that really is I guess for me, it's the less sort of self-aware it is, the more natural it feels, I guess, is kind of the way I approach it. But, you know, just, I think the thesis of, like, this movie at its core is about Cora, you know, is about this powerful warrior woman who has to, like, kind of forgive herself, you know. And I think that as sort of a thesis is, the rest kind of takes care of itself. But yeah, I think that's how I kind of approach it.
Thank you.
DJ?
DJ.
There he is.
Just a simple question. Given the enthusiasm for this sci-fi heavy metal freak out, like, it's got to be a no-brainer at Netflix to just greenlight 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
Yeah?
I'm not in charge of that, you know. I just do that, and then they tell me. So, yeah. From your lips to God's ears, I guess, is how that goes. Very good. Thanks, Deej. DJ, of course, was one of the visual effects supervisors on the motion picture. So that was a little bit of that was a teeny bit of an inside job in the questioning part of it, but you can't resist DJ. You gotta. Wait, does the birthday boy have a question? Yeah, right here. See him right there?
Birthday boy.
Birthday boy, give him the mic. 16. He's 16 today.
I just want to say up front, this is an amazing way to celebrate my 16th birthday. So, how did you get the courage to make the Zack Snyder's Justice League after, of course, the theatrical cut was, well, we all know.
That's a great question. I would say that yeah, it was a daunting thing. It was like I was at this crossroads. I wasn't sure the movie would ever happen. As far as, you know, I had this weird piece of faith. You know, it's funny because DJ was there at the beginning, like, or at the end, I guess. The end was the beginning. But like, where I just kind of was like, you know, there was that time when we had the cut. And DJ was like, you gotta just, that was the whole joke about us leaving it on a hard drive in a bathroom in the Hong Kong airport. You know, there was this whole kind of like, you gotta just do it because it's never gonna come out. The movie's never gonna come out. Like, that's it, it's dead. Like, that was our conversations we would have. And I said, you know, I don't know, I got this weird feeling. I don't know, call me crazy, but I think there's, you know what? Let's just see what happens in 5 years or whatever. And what's up? Who knows? Yeah, who knows? Exactly, who knows? And so, you know, cut two, you know, we had all kind of, you know, sort of moved on in our minds, but not in our hearts. And so there was this there was always this kind of like drumbeat that the fans kept going. Like it was almost like the fans didn't like let it go, you know. And I think because the fans were not going to they didn't let it go, and so the fans wouldn't let it go, and so it kept making me go like, wow, really? Like, is that a thing we should do? And then, you know, and I just think that then the planets aligned, and we found ourselves in a position where we could at least approach the powers that be and say, like, look, this is a good idea, and like the fans clearly want it, and I know how to do it, and like just let us do it. And you know, surprise, surprise, they were like, okay. And I was like, what? So the courage came from, you know, the fans, and sort of the heart came from us, and the rest is history. I also like your Risky Business t-shirt. I feel like that's a very appropriate shirt to be watching this movie wearing. It's kind of like a weird, there's a symbiotic relationship between Risky Business. Stanford could use a guy like Joel. I know that.
And I believe we have a raffle. I think
Oh, we're
that
gonna
was-
do a raffle.
Yeah, I think,
We're gonna find out who wins the picture.
yeah.
Oh yeah, guys, and also bid on the rest of them. I think there's like one bid on all the pictures. Someone's gonna get it for like $1, which is fine, I guess. On one hand, I don't care. So I'm gonna draw it, and then Adam's gonna read it.
Oh, I'm gonna read it.
Yeah, because you know I can't read. I'm dyslexic. You're like, who's that? There it is.
Okay. This is for the Zack Snyder General Loan.
Zack Snyder General Loan. You've seen it out there. It's cool, cool picture. It's the only one in the world that exists.
I'm just reading numbers off this, is that what I'm doing?
Oh, you guys gonna match the number? Jesus, this is really complicated.
We got the card, the ticket out? The lucky winner is 6060776.
What?
Congratulations.
Awesome. No, it's not you. It is you. Okay. You like shook your head like, I'm just kidding. It wasn't me. All right. So one other thing we're gonna do. We thought. Okay. So I made here. Give me one of those and I'll show you. Okay. So when we made the movie, you guys know. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but what happened was I made these anamorphic lenses to make this movie. We built them from scratch. Okay. Basically, what happened was there are these lenses, these Japanese lenses called Cinevision, which are these Japanese anamorphic lenses built in the 60s and 70s. And I got a hold of 2 sets of those old lenses. And then what we did with Zero Optic, which is this incredible company that built the lenses also for our Army of the Dead, we got together and I said, okay, I'm crazy, but what I want to do is I want to take the Noctilux and Summilux series of Leica lenses, and if you're familiar with those, they're really beautiful range-finding lenses, but what they don't have, what Leica doesn't have, is an anamorphic lens. So we took those lenses and we we attached, you say glued, but it's not glued. You attached those lenses to the anamorphic fronts of those things. And so we created these things called noctoscope lenses, completely fake, but not fake because you just saw them. And the 50 mil is a 0.95. Talk about fucking fast, right? So now we have a few of these, so I made these for the camera department. They're little skateboard decks, they're signed, and they're one of a kind, they don't exist anywhere. But we thought we'd just give out these as well.
We got 5 of them.
5 of them.
5 of them, let's boogie.
Go.
Okay.
Here, I'll pull one too.
Okay, here we are.
My
60.
glasses, fuck.
6060546.
Blah, 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 blah. No, I can't do it. Oh, yes! That's cool. Just wait for no one to say anything and be like, it's me. No.
All right, next one, 6060
Get a
801.
photo of that for sure. 6060801. I love that one.
Good one.
It's a great
Okay,
one.
6060 938.
Woo! They're dropping like flies.
Two more.
But these are attached. No, that's not cool. Maybe attached. There's one.
All right, 6060 721.
Nice.
Yeah. That's the last one, yeah. Oh, was
Is that it?
Was that it?
Oh,
That's
no. Wes has got one more.
it. You got one more? Okay.
You scared me, Wes. I was like,
I was trying to save myself another trip.
Okay,
Last
that's
one, please. 6060 677.
60, and there she is. Awesome. One for the ladies. All right, guys. Guess that's it, right? We're gonna wrap it up.
Thank you very much.
Guys, thank you so much for coming out. Appreciate it. Well, oh yeah, don't forget to go home and watch it again. For the algorithm. Watch it for the Netflix of it all. All right, thank you guys. Cheers.